Okay, so as usual, welcome to the program today, by the way. So as usual, we lay out this big, ambitious list of things we're going to talk about yesterday. And it's not as if Zach and I didn't have the time to do it. We did. But after we said goodbye to Shane Wright, who was very gracious with his time, as it turns out, he stayed on a lot longer than we thought he was going to, but good for Shane Wright. Thank you. Zach and I, along with the chat, just sort of BS'd for, what do you say, Zach, like 45 minutes, and didn't get to something that I mentioned off the top that's very specifically I wanted to do because, listen, only a couple of games last night in the NHL, but we're back to like a big, huge hockey fest tonight around the league, and every time you're going to see something like this, you're going to be thinking the exact same thing, I suspect, because after Jake Allen told me this a couple of years ago, now I can't stop seeing it everywhere. And I swear, Zach, we're going to get to it today. And it involves Patrick Kane. But now we're rewinding to Sunday because I am such a bad host. I am completely incapable of sticking to a script. And you know what? Like a real host who's been in the industry going back to 1995, I'm going to blame it on my producer. You're supposed to be my effing guardrail. You're supposed to be the one that says, gentle reminder, Jeff, you were going to talk about this. This can't be my fault, Zach Phillips. This is yours, it's not. Philly, not mine. This one's on you. How about that? Am I doing it right? Fault. Do I sound like Morning Cup of Hockey when they're always blaming Vic? Anything happens, it's Vic's problem. It's Vic's fault.
Yeah,
Colby's sick.
Vic's fault.
Vic's fault. Vic's fault. Yeah, Vic's fault. Yes. It's all Vic's fault. It's all Philly's fault.
But we'll
we are going to get to it today. All right, we're going to get to that today. It's also Greg Wyshynski Day. It's Tuesday, so we're back to our normal. And by the way, if you're watching on YouTube, man, I got this like violent cut on my lip, on the bottom lip, which is probably totally distracting to anybody who's watching. But like, I just woke up on Saturday and like my lip was split, like I had just gone to overtime with Team Canada a couple of nights before. Hold your USA jokes for when Greg Wyshynski stops by the broadcast here in a couple of minutes here. We got a lot we want to get to with Wyshynski, and one of the things that I'd like to bring up with Greg, like put it this way, I know Greg, and I think he put it up on his preview at his Twitter X feed, that he's going to eat shit for USA losing to Canada. I'm not that guy. Like I can't do the Snoopy dance. Like I could do it for a day. I can make my one little joke about, they play the It's Our Time speech before the games for a reason and don't hold it for later. Like, okay, I made my little joke.
You if you want.
You want to do it? You want to do the Snoopy dance? Okay.
I can do it. All right. Yeah.
I may just turn the recreation over to you.
I mean, I don't know. You're not able to do it. I can fire up some hate here. We heard that loudmouth Wyshynski come on here with his big stupid hat and all that stuff, and he's throwing shade at us up north of the border, talking about it's our time, it's our game. Well, guess what, Wyshynski and you Americans, you blew your load early on Saturday night in the first 9 seconds, and we took it back, and we called it our game, and you never had a shot because it was always Canada's game, and it belongs above the border. The Four Nations Trophy, Jeff, belongs above the border, and that's where it's going to stay.
Can I ask you a question about the Four Nations Trophy? Trophy? What's it? Yeah. What's the name? Let's see how serious they take this tournament. What's the name of the trophy?
I don't care. We want it. It's the Four Nations Trophy. It's ours. I know the name
because it doesn't have a name.
You stumped me on that one. Like you should have just let.
There's no name. There's no name. It's just here's a trophy. Here, guys. You get older, you just gotta laugh about things. All right, Daily Outlines presented by our friends and partners at FanDuel, North America's #1 sportsbook app provider. And coming up on the program today, as mentioned, Greg Wyshynski of ESPN.com. Now, ESPN is right now in the process of untangling themselves with Major League Baseball. And I do wonder, as a hockey fan, maybe can hockey start to fill that programming vacuum, not so much this year, but next year, that baseball will have previously occupied. Sundays, I'm looking your direction. Showtime for the second day in a row. That is a headline here on our FanDuel Daily Outline, and we are going to get to this Pat Kane thing. Yeah, I know, maybe. I know. Thank you, producer. Thank you very much for doubting me right off the top. I guess you've known me long enough now, the scant few months we've done this program. Mark Scheifele as well. Mark Scheifele is someone who, there are some players that when their season is done, they put away their equipment and they turn off the television, they turn off their tablet, and they just like don't watch. Scheifele is the opposite. Like Scheifele's the guy who's a hockey player, who's also a major hockey fan. So naturally, personally, myself, and I suspect you as well, want a guy like Mark Scheifele to be successful, and congratulations, Mark Scheifele now holds the mark for most in the Winnipeg Jets version 2.0, most goals scored, 329. Passes Ilya Kovalchuk, who's another player that I really loved and en route. The Winnipeg Jets just keep on rolling and rolling and rolling along. I always do sort of sideways snicker when I hear comments like, are they peaking too early? As if Scott Arniel is going to deliberately tell players or coach so that they stop winning. Like it's something you can somehow, I guess you can control winning, but as if like it's something that is just sort of, faded towards you. Anyhow, we'll get into the Winnipeg Jets here coming up in a little bit later on with Greg Wyshynski and the Tkachuk show, specifically the injured Matthew Tkachuk and his appearance on the Tonight Show. This is something that we talked about yesterday on the program, and the idea of the NHL capitalizing as much as they can on the success of the Four Nations, which captured everybody's imagination, not just hockey fans, but other sports as well. I mentioned on the program yesterday, listening to my favorite baseball podcast, Effectively Wild, and they were talking about it. That surreal moment where your first love, your favorite sport, all of a sudden bleeds into the podcast for another sport. And finally, for hockey, it's positive. And with that, we'll bring in Greg Wyshynski from ESPN.com. We have a lot to get to with Greg Wyshynski, who the last time we spoke was wearing a lovely USA hat.
It's right here. And, it came attached with a beard on it, which I didn't wear. But here's the hat.
All right, very good.
I will toss it towards the camera and throw it over there when I will recover it back in
I don't do Snoopy dances for sporting events.
Yeah, I know.
I know.
No,
like
I your little boy producer there who had the gall to say those terrible things before I came on the air. And now where is he?
Nope.
Look, by the way, let me answer your question.
Okay.
The Four Nations Faceoff trophy is back in the lobby of a Marriott with fake flowers in it. Is there something in the NHL charter that says that we can't have a large trophy with a bowl at the end, that it can only be the Stanley Cup? Because when we have the World Cup of Hockey, it's a giant paperweight. When we have the Four Nations face-off, it's an urn with your uncle's ashes in it. It looked like did the players get larger or did the trophy get smaller at the end of that game is what I was asking. Why can't we just have a large, substantial cup at the end of one of these tournaments? I don't know the answer.
We've had the cups versus plates discussion here. I believe you and I'm very much in favor of plates, and you're very much you're a cup guy.
Wimbledon only for the plates for me.
I know you're a drinking guy. I'm an eating guy, so I like the plates, and you like the cups. We've established that. Like, look, as I was saying off the, I will do one little. Why don't? Sorry, I was going to do a bong joke there. Why don't? Now that would be something. If it's going to be.
Oh, there it is, my friend. Right?
Whoa.
That makes a lot of sense, doesn't it?
Why don't we do
that for one of these trophies? Hold the phone for a second.
Why does it have to be a cup? Why can't it be a bong?
Yeah. The Joe Thornton trophy. No, I'm just assuming. I mean, I think we all assumed it
goes along with the beard.
But you're right. What would it be? It would be like a giant. We couldn't do silver. You'd probably still have to do glass. But now we're talking.
We may have some here. Okay, but the one thing that I will do one tiny little Snoopy dance here. And I mentioned this on the show on Friday. Greg, my dear friend, my American friend, most of my family live in the United States, the majority in Livonia, Michigan. I grew up going back and forth between Toronto and Livonia, the middle ground, of course, London, Ontario, where we would have family picnics at Storybook Gardens. The Canada and United States coming together, best of friends, family, etc., etc., etc. But there's a reason, Greg Wyshynski, that the United States plays the miracle Herb Brooks, this is our time video clip before the game and don't save it for later on.
Yeah, we do a lot of things before the game. The president calls to congratulate us before the game. We play the miracle speech before the game.
Yeah.
I mean, again, like it just to put into sharp relief the differences in best on best successes between our countries. You guys had former favorite son Wayne Gretzky come out, still a very accomplished hockey player. I don't know if you've heard of him. And we had our version of Paul Henderson come out because we haven't done anything. Yeah. We haven't done anything since 1980.
I absolutely loved seeing Micah Ruggioni in the Gaudreau jersey. That was great. That was like freaking nailed it. So
would I have preferred to see Ryan Miller in the Tkachuk in the Gaudreau jersey? Would I prefer to have seen TJ Oshie in the Gaudreau jersey? Would I have preferred to see anybody that have won a gold medal in the Olympics since 1980 wearing that jersey? Yes, because it hasn't happened. And that is really the legacy of USA Hockey at this moment. Look, I think that the Canadians proved something important at Four Nations. I think they proved that if your arch rival is down to 10 forwards, if one of those forwards is literally the leader of the team, and if the best defenseman in the world is across the continent because his team won't let him fly to participate in the tournament, despite the head coach saying he would be in the tournament, then I think you guys can definitely beat the Americans in overtime. I think you've proven it.
Why is it that all these marquee games, it's always the same play, the pass from the corner, and then beat the goaltender clean? Like it was Ginla to Crosby, and now it's Marner to McDavid. Like you'd think, like you guys had a lot of time to think about this in between and go like, okay, play coming out of the corner here. We've kind of seen this movie before in international hockey between our two teams. Like let's maybe, Brock Nelson get on that center guy 97 there a little quicker. Sullivan likes to play the overload on the players, not man to man. So maybe let's heads up on that read.
You might have even said it. Like if this Rod Brindamore was somehow coaching Team USA, that play never happens. But yeah,
100% true.
I would say the advice given to the players before the next overtime between our countries would be: let's not leave the best player in the world open in the slot. We keep doing it, and whoever the next best player in the world is, will probably do it again. But look, listen. I come away from Four Nations very sad. Once again, I don't know how you guys keep getting away with it. You keep getting away with it, and I'm encouraged about 2026 because one, we clearly can beat you guys, and two,
totally,
I want to believe that the Americans will learn some lessons from this tournament. I think a lot of the young guys that have never been in this position have gained valuable experience going forward to 2026, and now they can kind of tweak and reshape the roster a little bit. The defense is fine outside of maybe one guy who we'll talk about in a second.
Yeah.
But up front, like there's a lot of guys knocking at the door that now we can maybe have a conversation about versus running it back with the bottom six that we ran it back with in Four Nations. I don't know. Goaltending fine, defense fine, forward group maybe a little discussion there. And I'm actually more confident now than I was at the beginning of Four Nations that the Americans will walk away from Italy with Olympic gold for the first time since 1980.
I've been saying it for years, only a matter of time. It's only a matter of time. But here we are again. Now, here's this, because listen, my DMs, my Twitter feed, all of it. Oh, Marek, you suck. You said this tournament was a joke. Oh, you're the worst. Like you shouldn't even be able to talk about okay. So what I've said was I don't like the tournament. I do like the games. All right? The tournament itself, it's round robin of 3 and then a final, and then that's it. Now, I went into this tournament with one hope, and that was this. Because honestly, in a tournament this short, I know we built it up to be 72 or 1980, like all these things, but again, it's 4 games. It's 4 frickin' games. All right?
Yeah.
My best hope for this tournament actually came true. And that was that hockey benefited. Like capital H hockey. Like out of all of this, it captured imaginations. I didn't think it would. I knew the political climate going in and all that and the expectation of Canada versus USA, but I didn't think about wildest dreams that it would take on this timber. Again, we talked about the Tkachuks, and NHL owes a favor. That was a big thank you to the Tkachuks, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
But all of this now has turned into this beginning of what could be a real big wave for hockey. And there's a couple of things I want to get into here. if I'm the NHL, and they've already started to do this, and listen, you got to like stick tap, tip the cap, all of it when the NHL does something right. And right now, what they're doing is, listen, Matthew Tkachuk, once upon a time, injured players hide. They run away, they go away, you don't see them. Matthew Tkachuk on the Tonight Show, being as charming
I want to punch you right in the face for calling him Matthew Canuck. I swear to God. If you ever do that again, Marek, I'm reaching right through this camera and punching you in the face. I know it was a faux pas. Never call him Matthew Canuck again. He's a red-blooded, rock-ribbed American who happens to have Canadian ancestry. Go ahead.
Listen. The Canadians just made him play too hard, and he hurt himself. It's like a lot of American players. We just made you play too hard. Now you're all injured. But no, like the NHL's got Matthew Tkachuk. Did I say that right? Has Matthew Tkachuk on the Tonight Show. And like my thought on all of it was like basketball has kind of taken a knee here and is not in a great spot. Fill the void. If I'm the NHL, I'm doing everything with my partners. I'm doing everything with my checkbook to try to make sure that my game is everywhere. All the highlights, everyone, just flood the internet, flood social media, flood highlight shows. You have to buy your way on. It doesn't matter. This is one of those moments where it's like, okay, we need to find budget for this right now because our game is so hot. Other sports have taken a knee. Super Bowl is done. Basketball is in the place that basketball is in. And right now, this is the time where the NHL should just be completely flooding everybody with all of their highlights. And I don't think that anybody, whether it was my old company or whether it's the rights holder that you work for, can pump enough what we just saw. You cannot show those 9 seconds. You can't show them too much. You cannot show in Canada the McDavid goal enough. All of it, like just make us like to the point of becoming sick about it. Just completely bathe everybody in hockey highlights right now because you're grabbing on to fans, like you're gobbling into fans like Pac-Man. Just like another fan. And I got to give the NHL credit. They're starting to do it, and it begins with Matthew Tkachuk on the Tonight Show.
I want to pause on the Tkachuks for a second,
Matthew,
because you're making me play devil's advocate here. And I don't mean that as I'm a Devils fan, although everybody constantly reminds me of that.
James Casey looks good, by the way.
He does look good. I mean, Simon Nemec is going to be really looking good in someone else's uniform soon. So don't we do this every Olympics? Like, don't we do the thing you're doing every Olympics of, the best on best and how great it is and the moments and now everyone will talk about Ryan Miller and everyone will talk about TJ Oshie and everyone will talk now about Matthew Tkachuk. We do this every single time we're in the Olympics.
Okay, pause for 1 second because you're missing something really big here.
Which is?
The NHL controls all of this. The NHL
but it doesn't change the fact that
what I'm saying is everything. Like you own all of this. And this is why the World Cup is so important to the NHL. Yes, all of it. Okay. Flood. Burn it into people's memory.
Okay, and so when they tune in to Ottawa and Columbus on Tuesday, and it's not USA Canada, then what happens? Again, I'm not trying to be a Debbie Downer here. I'm just trying to say that this is the same thing that happens every time we get a bump from Best on Best, is that people reintegrate and reengage with the regular season content, and it looks nothing like the thing they saw. Now, the playoffs kind of do if you squint hard enough, which is why I do think that your idea, if you did it maybe a month and a half from now, might have more merit.
No,
and they are also going to get a bump. Hold on, but they're also going to get a bump because they're. But what's the momentum end up with? Someone tuning in to watch something that looks nothing like USA Canada. Someone tuning in to watch Matthew Tkachuk in a Florida game against, Philly, and it doesn't look anything like USA Canada. You do that and remind people, and you bring them into the Stanley Cup playoffs with that very footage you're talking about. But the other thing you're forgetting is that they're going to get a huge bump from the Ovechkin thing. Like, people are going to pay attention to Ovechkin in the record chase for at least like the week it's going to happen. And so they'll have that momentum at the end of the season, right into using the USA Canada footage to go right into the games that actually do resemble the stuff that people liked.
So that was a great weekend we talked about this yesterday. It was a great weekend for the Washington Capitals, who didn't have a single player in the Four Nations, and they just came out and dummied the NHL. They dummied Crosby's team. They dummied McDavid's team. It was almost as if the Washington Capitals were taking it out on Canada. They did it to Crosby. They did it to McDavid. Like, this was the Washington Capitals saying, Okay, not on my watch, hippie.
The team from our nation's capital taking it out on the Canadian
Yes,
teams.
exactly.
I want to get to the Caps in a second, but I do want to. I want to pause on the Tkachuks for a second because before I found out that Matthew Tkachuk was going to be on the Tonight Show, my wife and I, Ruby, were having a discussion about whether or not they've now become synonymous with USA Hockey. Whether you could say the word Tkachuk to a normie sports fan, and they'll know what it means. And so she disagreed with me. She's like, I don't think it's quite gotten to that spot yet. I don't think this thing quite had the impact that you think it did. I think it's more about Canada, USA than it is about the Tkachuks. And I say this as a matter of putting it on the official record of the sheet and putting it out into the world. The rare Halley's Comet moment when I am right in a disagreement with my wife.
And you didn't have to cry. Didn't have to cry to get there either.
I didn't have to cry to get there. She did mea culpa and say, okay, he's on the Tonight Show. Like, clearly there's something that's happened here with the Tkachuks. And I think that's the case. Look,
like I mentioned this the other day as well. Like, your company, like in the promo picture going into Canada, USA, you know, there's on the Canadian side, there's Crosby and there's McDavid. Okay, obvious choices. And you look at the players that ESPN decided to promote in their one main promo pick, it's Matthew and Brady. Austin Matthews is nowhere to be seen. But then I come back to this uncomfortable conversation for some people. What was it that took them from here and put them up here? What was it? And this is something you and I have talked about going back to when we used to do the old pod. This is a rough, violent, dangerous, more than occasionally stupid sport that, while it doesn't allow fighting, it barely penalizes fighting.
Yeah. It's a real wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
It was the fights. Yeah. It was the fights. And that's why, you know, I mentioned on one of the first shows here that I did this year was, you know, we live right now in a culture that is more leaning into violent sports now. There's a number of reasons probably for that. But that's leaning into violent sports now more so than ever. Hockey's always had it. And over the last 10, 15 years, it's kind of shied away from it or pretended that it didn't exist or the potential for it wasn't always there. But what just took hockey to another level? The game was great. But even going into that game, sure, the political situation between the two countries was part of it. But the 9 seconds of love on Saturday in Montreal is what did it. That's what everybody's talking about.
You sound like me in the 90s. My big problem with Bettman in the 90s as far as marketing is that at a time when UFC started to boom and wrestling started to boom and football was king, the NHL was trying to market its product away from violence and was showing like Peter Forsberg pirouetting through the offensive zone. Oh, by the way, at a time when no one was scoring, like it was the trap years. No one was scoring. They were running away from violence. I thought it was one of the biggest mistakes Bettman and his group made in his early commissionership was not leaning harder into what made hockey unique at that time, at a time when people were craving it. But here's the thing. I don't disagree with you. And I also think that the reason the fights resonated was, like you mentioned, the atmosphere that was obviously born from the geopolitical thing, but also just the rivalry, but also because they were unexpected. Like, no one expected 3 fights in 9 seconds. Even if you expected one fight at the start of that game as a pressure release, you certainly didn't expect the other two. But I think the reason the Tkachuks resonate is not just the fighting.
They're good players.
The swagger.
They're good. Well, plus they're good players. I think that's an important one here, too.
Yeah, we talked about this last week, like the idea that the secret sauce of this tournament was that when people gravitated towards what was happening in the rivalry and heard about the fights, they stayed to watch the best version of the sport. like that's what kind of made people come back in record numbers next Thursday. It was not only the fireworks, the rivalry, the passion, the championship on the line. It was also, I'm going to settle in for 2.5 hours and I'm going to see something pretty damn good from an athletic entertainment perspective. But it's the swagger. It's like, you know, if Matthew Tkachuk and Brady Tkachuk don't sit there together after the game and be like, it's our time, to double down on what we had just seen previously.
So
it
good.
doesn't, I don't think, resonate the same way. Like Matthew Tkachuk's on the Tonight Show, not because he had a fight in the first second of a hockey game in Montreal. It's because he backs it up with his words, backs it up with his play, and has the swagger and the attitude that, younger generations gravitate to in record numbers when it comes to athletes these days.
But here's the thing, and I know the answer is the swagger, but it takes two people to fight.
Sure.
Why is Brandon Hagel why are Brandon Hagel and Sam Bennett not lauded the same way as Brady Tkachuk and Matthew Tkachuk? They did the exact same thing. It's like, we're doing this,
and
okay.
John Cooper,
and then you have
and
then you have Brady Tkachuk saying, like, Sammy, you and I go next, and Sammy's like, yeah, sure, fine,
yeah,
let's do it.
Well, he said, I'm sure fine. Then he checked with Coop, and Coop signed off on it.
Yeah.
Like, that's the other thing too. I mean, there's a certain showmanship involved with all of this, as you mentioned. You have to have willing participants. I mean, God, how many enforcers have we heard in the last 15 years talk about the end of their profession because they don't have any dance partners? Hagel has to fight. Bennett has to fight. Parayko has to fight. They all agreed to do it, and it all led to that spectacle. You're completely right.
Anything more on Four Nations, or shall we move on to the NHL?
So
anything more you want to add?
Yeah, there is one thing. Like, I
know what I want to ask you. Hang on. I know what I want to ask you.
Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
It might be a little bit.
Please.
I know it's a sensitive issue, and I know you work for ESPN and can't comment on the relationship between ESPN and baseball, so let's bracket that. Yeah. But there's going to be some programming time available here unless things change, and Sundays I'm looking your direction. This could be a bonanza for hockey. This really could be a bonanza for hockey.
I mean, anytime there's programming hours available, you're preaching to the choir as far as me wanting to fill it with hockey. The other interesting thing from a broadcasting perspective, and I wrote about this on Friday, was what now for international hockey? What now for best on best? We know we're getting the Olympics, 2 years later the World Cup, 2 years later the Olympics. Yep. We know we're getting an all-star game next year, but we don't know what we're getting after that for insofar as the years that fill in between those international events. Now, we assume it'll be the all-star game unless they want to double up in some of these years, and they're doing so next year. But I in talking to sources on site in Boston, it's pretty clear they don't have a roadmap right now because all possibilities are on the table after Four Nations. It's a good problem to have, right? Mm-hmm. It's a good problem to have something that is so scorching hot and so attractive to fans, advertisers, mass media, normie fans, people who never talk about hockey, that you can then trot that out in some way, shape, or form to re-engage all those people. So, like, do we see a USA-Canada Summit Series in the intervening years between the World Cup and the Olympics?
Yes,
I don't know,
potentially. Please.
I think you definitely could.
Please.
And you put some games in Canada, you put some games in the US, and you capitalize on what is clear. Again, we talked about this before the tournament when you were like poo-pooing the whole thing, and I told you the easiest sell for a casual fan in the US is the USA-Canada rivalry, and on top of that, the USA trying to be the best at something that somebody else is better than us at. And look no further than women's hockey. We have an entire women's pro league built on the USA-Canada rivalry. They barnstormed throughout the continent with the USA-Canada rivalry, attracted fans, brought attention to the product, and now we have an entire women's pro league in its second year based on the success of those games and based on the the skill of the players in those games. I mean, that's how important the rivalry is, and so they're gonna find a way to capitalize on it. I do agree with Connor McDavid and Jack Hughes. Both said the same thing. You don't want too much of a good thing, but I don't see how they don't just smash the button on a USA Canada something in between the Olympics and the World Cup.
Summit Series. It's how long have we been saying the future of international hockey is the same as the women. It's Canada versus the United States. Now, just as a quick aside, with the women's game and the Canada versus U.S. rivalry, which plays itself out every year in the rivalry series and the Olympics and the World Championships, the challenge the PWHL, and they're only this is only their second season, as we know. The challenge they're going to have is can their league itself make stars? Because right now that league relies on international competition to make stars.
Right.
Like Sarah Fillier becomes a star and then gets selected first overall by New York, but she's a star going in. When will that league be strong enough that they can make their own stars regardless?
And is there a
of
way?
international
Is there a way
competition?
to capitalize on USA Canada within that league? I mean, obviously, Worlds, Olympics. I mean, everyone knows when those games are happening and when they matter. Is there a way to kind of use that rivalry to fuel that league a little bit? So that's the interesting development for the NHL. It's like I said, great problem to have when you have like nearly 10 million people watching your product. And I do wonder what it ultimately means for All-Star going forward and what they're going to do in those intervening years between the World Cup and the Olympics.
A couple of players who distinguished themselves. Yes.
Yeah. I wanted to mention that too.
Players who distinguished themselves, players who took a step back. And let me start with this. Going into that last game, there was the Jake Gensel goal. There was the Esa Lindell goal. There was the Adrian Kempe goal. There was always the one goal that Jordan Binnington allowed that you looked at and said,
"Sing it, baby." Yeah.
But then there was that last game where it wasn't happening, and he wasn't going to allow that goal. I don't know that anyone listen. Thomas Harley was really good. Dylan Larkin went to another level. I thought Jake Sanderson, Harley and Sanderson, good on those guys. Talk about coming in tough spots and performing. Like those two guys were awesome. But man, did Jordan Binnington do himself a world of good. Even though all goaltender observers will tell you this guy's been a good goaltender for a long time, but never, with all due respect to the Stanley Cup in 2019, never at that level with that kind of pressure.
Larkin, I'll pause on Larkin for a second because that reminded me of seeing an actor or actress that you don't really get, and then you see them in the right role, and you're like, oh, okay, now I understand. Larkin was so good, man. I've been seeing so many mea culpas about Binnington, and I didn't realize he was that guy. I mean, to me, it's just exactly as you described. He's that guy. He's the guy that gives up goals during the course of a game where you say to yourself, how is this guy even buying a ticket to a best on best tournament? And then there's another guy named Jordan Binnington who makes the saves that he makes in overtime. And you're like, how does this guy ever lose the Vezina? That's the Jordan Binnington experience. That's always been the Jordan Binnington experience. I mean, it's the reason why every time you bring up where he should be in the pecking order of great NHL goalies, there's this militia in St. Louis, probably literally and figuratively, who come out and defend him to the hilt because he passes the eye test. And they say, you can't throw analytics at me. I know what I see. And it's because when you watch the guy, he'll give up a softie, he'll misplay a puck, and then he'll be unstoppable during certain parts of the game or during certain weeks of the season. So I'm going to say, I'm not going to mea culpa it. I think Jordan Binnington is exactly who I thought he was. And unfortunately for the Americans, part of what he does is be unstoppable at times and morph into Dominik Hasek and do what he did in overtime. The two guys on the Americans, I was a little disappointed by. Jack Hughes was playing out of position. He had 11 shots on goal. He's playing with Austin Matthews. Those are two guys that love to have the puck on their stick. He didn't really excel physically in that tournament as well, as far as getting bodied off the puck. I love Jack. There's no way he's not going to be on the 2026 team, but I don't know, man. He was a little miscast in that role on Matthews' wing, and he tried to do a little too much. He also, I think, knew that a mistake going the other way could probably mean a goal in an important game. Yeah. It wasn't the best tournament for him. What did you think?
When I think of Jack Hughes in this tournament, you know what I think about? I think about that icing race that led to the face-off in the offensive zone for Team Canada, which, by the way, is maybe more of a comment on one great play by Braden Point, who, in a lot of ways, most forwards would look at Thomas Harley in that situation and say, oh, that's his puck go. But Point just gets on his horse. But that was you always look at those flashpoint moments, the game within a game. That was such a cool moment in that sport. Guys, I know it's such a small, tiny, geeky thing. You really got to love the game for that one. But that gallop for the puck with two of the superstars in the game, Braden frickin' Point, Jack Hughes racing with everything that is left in their legs to either keep the puck hot or send it back the other way. I don't know what I think. I know he didn't have the best of all possible tournaments, but that race at the end with Braden Point, when you say Jack Hughes, Four Nations face-off, it's the race with Braden Point. for me. That's what I'll.
And I guess we should also note at this point that the inability of Mike Sullivan to call a timeout in that situation was because of an NHL rule change that I'm sure was enacted by a Canadian at some point for that very moment in overtime of the Four Nations tournament to make sure that he couldn't call a timeout and give his guys a blow. The other guy is Adam Fox.
Hang on.
What?
I want to try to lead the witness here. Should that have been a too many men on the ice call in Canada?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Oh, you mean should the Americans have gotten a power play at some point in that game? Yeah, sure, probably. At some point, maybe one.
Okay, I just wanted to give you some. Just wanted to hand you a little protein shake there halfway through the show. It's like, all right, Greg needs a little picking me up. Let's just get some protein in a blender here and hand it to our boy Wish.
Adam Fox wasn't good. Oh boy, he's not good. A lot of people are saying he hasn't been good since his injury, and
yeah,
there's something probably to be said about that. I know it was mentioned earlier on this very network, the idea that they need to get him with a better, more stout defensive partner with the Rangers, so he can not have to do everything himself. And I think there's probably some merit to that as well. But like he had absolutely no offensive impact on this series, despite running the power play,
which is weird. Which is weird.
Very weird. Very weird. And on that, listen, I know that everyone has spent a lot of energy dunking on Austin Matthews for what happened on the McDavid goal in overtime.
That's not his.
Watch
That's
the play,
his.
man.
That's not his.
Adam Fox abandons his post. He's over by Hannafin on the other side of the crease,
100%.
and Marner's open, and Matthews is like, holy crap! And then he skates over to Marner, and then now McDavid's open in the slot. I mean, that was. I'd heard kind of anecdotally that Fox was getting the preponderance of the blame around Team USA for that play, and it's probably true because he's the one who kind of blew coverage on that.
That's Sullivan. Sullivan wants the overload on the player in the corner, right? Like the read, according to how Sullivan wants it played, is Matthews looks at that and says like, okay, I got to go in for the overload. We got a winger coming down. We're going to funnel the puck back up to the point, and everything's going to be fine. Brock Nelson was way over at the boards and didn't have time to get to Connor McDavid, as Austin Matthews has to watch Mitch Marner sail one right under his nose.
And then Fox has to get back to the other side of the crease where he currently is.
Here's the fear.
Have a conversation with Noah Hannafin at the most inopportune time because I don't know.
Here's the fear. Here's the fear again for Adam Fox. Like, you don't want a tournament like this to totally destroy somebody. Like, you remember, was it Canada Cup 81? That last game where Mike Lee...
I don't remember Canada Cup 81.
Was it 81 or was it 84? Hang on. There was one of those... Either. Okay. So I just assumed that everyone's seen everything. I'm stupid. Like, dude, trust me. Welcome to my stupid life. Anyway, there was that game against...
I think I still had a pacifier at that point.
There was a game... There was the final game where the Soviets beat Canada, and it was a pumping. It was like 8-1 final or 9-1 final, and it honestly ruined one of the great goalies of that era, Mike Liut. Again, there's another St. Louis Blues goaltender, and I remember interviewing him a few years ago, and he's like, I still like that. It's just such a low feeling that you can't, even though it's like it's a Canada Cup, it's a tournament, etc. It shouldn't bleed into the NHL. But
it still matters.
It matters, and it totally affected Mike Liut, who we should talk about in a lot more favorable way because Mike Liut was an incredible goaltender.
Yeah.
But that game like dented him deep. And my fear for Adam Fox is, and listen, we got a hell of a game tonight between the Rangers and the Islanders. Two teams vying for and it's the two Russian goaltenders going head to head. And all right, this is going to be cool. But you wonder about Adam Fox here, like what is the cascade here coming off of this tournament, if any? Like the last thing you want, this is going to sound harsh, but here I go. Like the last thing you want as a defenseman is to be considered like the worst Norris Trophy winning defenseman since Randy Carlyle. Like Randy Carlyle won. What I'm saying is,
Fox is really good.
What's that? Adam Fox is awesome.
I think he's really good. Yeah.
So do I. But at this tournament, tough one. And the last thing you want to see is a tournament like that for someone like Adam Fox cascade into the rest of the regular season for him.
My concern for him is the numbers game. Like, if you look at, I mean, you could make the argument that the U.S. could run back the entire crew that they had on their blue line in Four Nations, right? No one's going to age out of it. You add Quinn Hughes. You add Jake Sanderson. You got Luke Hughes waiting in the wings. I I don't know. It could end up being a numbers game. I would be shocked if he doesn't go, but I do think that this, if we're talking about players,
expanded roster, he's going. Expanded roster, he's going.
If you're talking about, I mean, he's not. I mean, he's better than like Lane Hudson, right? So like, not to besmirch the good name of Lane Hudson. Now I don't want Montreal mad at me, but like
Lane Hudson's good, man.
But like again, like if you're talking about the player who had the thing happen that we thought could happen, which is that his reputation took a dip because of what happened in this exhibition tournament, like it's probably Adam Fox, if we're being honest.
Yeah. Anything more on this one? Because I do want to do.
No, hang on. I've said all I need to say.
Okay, hang on. One thing that we got here in the chat from Jessica L. Okay, real talk. Do younger Canadians go back and watch these Canada Cup games from the 80s?
Do they?
I mean, I do, but I like watching old games in the off season.
Well, here's the thing.
I don't know if people. Hang on. Let me ask Zach. Hang on. Why don't we ask like a younger person, Greg, instead of us?
We have one here.
Instead of Stadler and Waldorf barking on about answering Jessica's question about younger kids in hockey. Why don't we ask one? Hey, Zach, do you ever go back and watch like Canada Cup games from the 80s?
No, I do not. I've never done that. That's not something that's ever crossed my mind. I can tell you though, Jeff, and something you would know. You remember, and Greg wouldn't know this, but Leafs TV.
Yeah, of course.
They run all the old Leafs games. Yes, I watched those. But that's
love those. Do you remember that, Greg? Like, because Leafs TV would run this every Sunday. They would run a vintage game, and Joe Bowen would host it. And they'd bring in one of the old timers from that game, and they'd pause where there's like TV timeouts, and they'd talk about the game and blah 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 blah. It was a cool idea. So many of these ideas, by the way, were John Shannon's, by the way, who ran Leafs TV.
Yeah.
I have to give it up to John Shannon. John was and still is a brilliant programmer, and he was the idea behind a lot of this stuff. The brains behind it.
I know Leafs TV as the reason I can't get my recorder close to any Leafs player when I'm in Toronto because I'm being blocked by all the cameras and microphones. But they would do the same thing on NHL Network. Especially during the summer, they would play a lot of classic games. I would wager 95% of the Americans on the Four Nations team have not actually watched The Miracle on Ice. But I would also wager that 95% of the players, I would say 100% of the players on the Four Nations team have watched the movie Miracle. It is incredible how that has I mean, it's a new Slapshot, basically. Okay. It's a new Slapshot. Like you put on Miracle on the bus.
I watched it last night.
And you watched Miracle.
I watched it last night.
You watched Miracle last night?
You know what I'm talking about, right? Yeah.
So I told my girlfriend that we have to watch it, and then
why?
I swear I don't think she understood, because it's the best movie of all time. But I don't think she understood like the magnitude of the Saturday night game. And just out of nowhere, she was like, after they lost on Saturday, she brought it up and was like, "Can we watch it?" And I was like, "No, we're not allowed." And then on Thursday, when they won, she asked me right after, "Can we watch the movie now?" And I said, "Let's watch it as many times as you want." Sorry, I had to
Greg, this is Canadian foreplay. This what you're seeing right now. This is romantic Canada right here.
So you could both watch the game, exactly.
Honey,
so the as the old jokes go.
The Stanley Cup final from '89, Calgary. Oh, look at Lanny! Oh, look at Lanny! Is that Jim Poplinski? Pepper!
You and I are like, don't these youngins know Paul Newman? And then the youngins are like, Eddie Cahill is the best actor I've ever seen in Miracle. So,
by the way, today is the 48th anniversary of the release of Slapshot. ML Delich sent me that right before the show. Just throw that in there as a counter to your Miracle. By the way, a chat question, Lucas. Hey, Marek, do you force your kids to rewatch those games?
Yes.
I know I probably sound like I do, right? Sit down, children. Now we're going to watch the 1976 Canada Cup. Watch this line. Watch Bobby Clark. Watch Daryl Sittler here.
I do think there is room in the world to get like three of the more engaging players, like Seth Jarvis, let's say, and two others, and just have the Mystery Science Theater 3000 an old hockey game. 100%. We just film the whole thing.
Yeah,
like I would watch the shit out of that.
But the thing,
that all the time.
But here's the thing. I would watch the shit out of it too, but only if they like had a few drinks and were completely honest about how bad the hockey was.
Yeah.
Like kids today, like younger players now going back and watching games that I thought were amazing in like 1980. Look back at it now and go like, anyone get a back check here? Like what
Pretty
the
dope
hell?
if we could find a game
that,
that has-
that went in? That shot went in from there? What's this goalie
Yeah,
doing?
they're
How
like-
far is he coming out?
No wonder Gretzky potted that many, right? The guy
No
doesn't,
kidding,
The guy
yeah.
doesn't even go in the butterfly.
Go get him,
if we
Ovi.
could, if we could find a game where like their coach or GM is in the game too, that'd be pretty amazing.
That'd be fantastic.
yeah, it'd be fun. It'd be fun.
That's a
It'd be fun.
great idea. That is a fantastic
Thank you.
idea.
I'll put that out in the
really
world. If someone steals it,
That's great.
just keep in mind that I've already written it down and I've mailed it to myself, which is
Ooh.
how you copyright
Just-
ideas in the United
Just
States.
say,
Very
after
important.
you give out the idea, just say trademark. Trademark Greg Wyshynski.
Right.
Just trademark.
Although I can't, it doesn't matter because I'm talking to the, greatness borrows, genius steals guy. So you've
yeah,
already,
it's true. Yeah, yeah.
That's on the stone tablets you've bought down from whatever mountains in Canada as part of your commandments
That's right.
of
Greatness
life.
borrows, genius steals. Yeah, go for it. Everyone take
right.
everything. It's not stealing, it's sampling. Do we have time to pivot to the NHL at all? We got like 5 minutes left here. And I thought
I
we were
want
going
to
to
talk
do like
about
a cozy
the Hartman
15
thing real
minutes.
quick.
The what thing?
I want to talk about the Hartman thing real quick. The Hartman thing real quick.
Yeah, so Gary Bettman comes in and says, George, calm down. We're knocking this suspension down a couple of games. Your thoughts on this one?
I have a lot of questions about this. So Bettman dropped it from 10 games to 8 games. And the NHLPA went in asking for 8 games, right? And so the question I have is, if Bettman's argument is that 10 is egregious and 8 is okay because going from a 3-game suspension to a 10-game suspension is too large of a gap, does the Department of Player Safety then have to just escalate every suspension for a repeat offender and not judge everything on its own merits? Because that's kind of the argument that Bettman's making here. Maybe unintentionally, maybe intentionally, I don't know. Because the PA throughout Kadri and Wilson and all these guys that are repeat offenders. And Ryan Hartman is a guy who, in the NHL Department of Player Safety's own video, they said gets suspended every 60 games. Like that's the case.
They went. Hang on. By the way,
Hartman suspensions.
Honestly, that was like I know they say this culture has no poets, but when I saw that little BA do that little love letter in there, it's like every 60 games we're doing something with this guy.
Yeah.
I thought to myself, okay, someone is sending a message here because when have you heard anything remotely like that?
Right.
We've heard he's a
the message
repeat
didn't-
offender, previous, blah, blah, blah. But like to make it that specific, that to me is when it bled into poetry.
But it didn't resonate. Like Bettman decided
Yeah.
to still decrease the suspension to 8 games, despite this guy being a repeat offender. And so the question then becomes: Does player safety now have to ignore things existing on their own merits and just escalate for every repeat offender to make sure that they can get to 10 to send a message and not have there be some jump from, we gave them 6 and now it's 3 and now it's 10, but we can't go from 3 to 10 according to the commissioner. Like I just think this sends a really weird precedent, and I don't know why, it's that vital to, defend the virtue of a guy who gets disciplined every 60 games in this league.
But here's the thing too, like precedent can always get reset for the following season. This is the conversation we were having here on the show yesterday, Wish, when we were talking about Trevor Zegras. I thought it was going to be 2. I thought this one looked like Cogliano Kempe to me. 3, okay, I'm not going to quibble about one game. That's fine. But the conversation we were having was the Department of Player Safety calls things based on how they are instructed to enforce the game as set forth by the general managers. This is how we want the game enforced. Like they can do that, but this is like the marching orders for the Department of Player Safety are set by the managers of the 32 teams. You remember what happened when Brendan Shanahan had the badge, and he was throwing Dixies at everybody. You get 10 games, and you get 10 games
In the preseason,
remember It was Brendan Smith, right, who got the first Dixie, and everyone went like, "Whoa, dude, what are you doing?"
And I think Boleris might have been in the preseason too, if memory serves too. That Giants.
And then everyone said like, "Whoa, like we want to put a leash on these puppies here, but like let's let the puppies run a little bit here still." And it got sort of calmed down. But like you go and look at suspensions from the 80s, like Brown and Sandstrom was 15 games. Now we're talking about like 3. So like it can all get reset. That just, like to me, as much as that winks at the dynamic between the commissioner and the head of the Department of Player Safety, like that's a Gary Bettman, George Peros issue. To me, it's also an issue between NHL Commissioner Gary Bettman and the 32 general managers who obviously have a different idea of how they want the game called. Unless, by the way, the main caveat is unless it's their bull that gets gored, then everything is off. Right?
Then everything's off
then
the
it's
table.
like, that's got to be 15 games.
Bettman made the argument at the end of his ruling that 8 sends a message that will resonate with Hartman. I think 10 sends a louder message. I think having the league decrease the penalty sends a slightly less emphatic message.
It's like what Woody Allen.
But to go back to your point about,
it's like Woody Allen saying, like, yeah, an op-ed piece in the New York Times, yeah, like that's fine and dandy, but nothing sends a message like a baseball bat. A baseball bat really sends a like an op-ed piece in the Times doesn't really send a message like a baseball bat does. Anyhow, go ahead.
But to your point about Shanahan, like I've written extensively about the Department of Player Safety because I was there when it was founded. Mm-hmm. Shanahan and I had a lot of conversations about player safety when he first started, and the basis of starting that department was we have to send messages to the people that repeat and repeat and repeat dangerous hits. Now, most of that is hits to the head, Rule 48. Like that's really where it kind of started. Is we got to get these hits to the head out of the game, and I think the Department of Player Safety doesn't get nearly enough credit for having done so. But that being said, it was also about repeat offenders, and so when you look at Ryan Hartman, again, disciplined every 60 games, again, drove a guy's head into the ice and was lucky it was the only result was 5 stitches. I just don't get the idea that this is someone we gotta knock it down to 8 games for, man. This is the guy who the Department of Player Safety was built to give 10 games to.
I know,
and I didn't understand it.
And it's not as if it's like a completely foreign play to Hartman as well. C. Perfetti, Cole of the Winnipeg Jets, like another one off the draw.
Yeah.
All right. We got a punt. We're out of time with you. I thought we were gonna do more NHL. I thought we were gonna spend like a cozy 15 minutes talking about Four Nations, but
Four Nations. What else did I say we were going to talk about? Trade deadline. I'm excited about Seth Jones saying I got to go, and the Blackhawks being like, well, wait, we've just been hearing from Connor Bedard for the last year about how we don't have enough talent, and you're talent. So I don't know, man. Maybe we gotta keep you around to keep Connor happy. Who says we got to trade you? You do, not us.
No.
Oh, by the way, last thing.
Yeah.
I know this will be like something that Freezing Cold Takes will play on X at some point, formerly known as Twitter. I'd be shocked if Carolina traded Rantanen, wouldn't you? Like, wouldn't you be shocked if that happened?
No, because I don't put anything past Eric Tulsky. I take all convention and throw it out. If it was another general manager, I might be. But I don't put anything past Tulsky here. He doesn't think like everybody else.
I completely agree that he doesn't think like anyone else, but his main thought in acquiring Rantanen was to try to win a Stanley Cup in 2025. And there's nothing that will come to them. Elias Pettersson or anything that could come to them in a Rantanen trade or Rantanen retrade that will make them a better team than they are right now with Mikko Rantanen. And so, like, the idea that we all celebrated this guy being an accomplished playoff performer that can score that goal that Carolina can't seem to score to get them to a Stanley Cup final. Mm-hmm. And then we're like, but he won't sign there. So they'll trade him for, 2 guys that are like 50% of Rantanen. My brain cannot process it. I am not as smart as Eric Tulsky. I agree with you. He's an unconventional thinker. It means you can't take it off the table, but logically, having him be their own like free agent acquisition as the parlance, in the parlance,
I know.
It makes much more sense than trading him because you can't sign him. I just don't buy it. Like, you bought him in to try to win a cup. I don't know why you'd punt on it.
We got a punt. Right. Good points by you as always. All right. Greg Wyshynski, ESPN. Yeah. What's your latest up there right now?
NHL Bubble Watch.
Yes.
Like the potential playoff matchups, projected points, percentage chances of making the playoffs. Thursday will be the next trade deadline tiers. We'll get into some of this Rantanen stuff, the Seth Jones stuff, and other stuff too. Mm-hmm. Again, I want to just remind the listeners of the sheet, the MvsW fans out there, that when Matthew Tkachuk said it's our time, he did not say the parenthetical, which is in 2026. That's what he meant. He meant in 2026. Everyone assumed he meant Four Nations, but he meant, he's like, I feel like my groin is spaghetti right now. Parenthetical, it's our time in 2026.
Sorry for making the Americans play too hard. Well, we'll go easy.
Sorry for letting them 40. Sorry for making them put Kyle Connor in the press box. You probably could have scored in overtime.
Oh, dude, trust me. I know. It's like, it's funny because Josh Morrissey yesterday after the game was talking about like, oh, you know what, I really wanted to play in that game, but I knew I'd be hurting the team if I played, and I wasn't 100%. I'm just like, is this like a shot at Matthew Tkachuk? Like they won a gold medal, and like now he's like, part of me is like, oh, that's a shot at Matthew Tkachuk. Did you see the Morrissey thing last night?
I did not see that Morrissey thing.
I couldn't let my country down like that. Like, oh, jeez, man.
Yeah, I hate it.
Josh Morrissey, baby. All right, he wears 44,
thanks everybody.
Winnipeg. All right, see you, Wish. There he is. Greg Wyshynski from ESPN joins us every Tuesday here on The Sheet, and today we get a vibrant schedule. By the way, around the NHL, only a pair of games yesterday. How about that Quentin Byfield pass yesterday? FanDuel, proud to connect fans to the major sports moments that matter to them. Roster updates from Daily Faceoff, their fantasy Twitter X feed, and a couple of intriguing ones around the NHL tonight. At Boston TD Garden, Toronto faces up against Boston. What else do we have that's particularly interesting? Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, Calgary facing off against the Washington Capitals. Washington has just been flat out wrecking teams. Like they come back from the break, and as I was mentioning to Wish, like they wreck Crosby's team, they wreck McDavid's team. We'll see what they can do against Dan Vladar, who gets to start tonight for the Calgary Flames. Jake Ottinger starts. Logan Stankoven returns after being healthy scratched. Liam Bichelle for Dallas as the Stars face off against the Columbus Blue Jackets at Nationwide Arena. He is in concussion protocol. This after the Casey Cizikas hit on the weekend. Elvis Merzlikins starts for CBJ at Nationwide Arena. Edmonton facing off against Tampa. I know that Stuart Skinner has really heard it lately, and understandably so. The thing, Zach, let me get your thoughts on this one. The thing about the Edmonton Oilers, to me, is this is the way this time of year always goes. Beginning of the year, they were the worst team in the world, and then for a few months, they were the best team in the world, and now they're back to being the worst team in the world, and the goalie's hard to hit, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I get it. But part of me just wants to say, we've seen this movie, like we watch this movie every single year from the Edmonton Oilers, don't we?
Yes, but my question back to you would be that, do you not, especially if you're an Oilers fan, do you not have some type of like panic in the back of your head that maybe that run by Stuart Skinner was one and done?
That's the thing. I know. I get it. I'm with you 100%, but then things course corrects. Klingberg, by the way, scratched tonight for Edmonton.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it's like the conversation we had yesterday, and I kind of thought about it more after the show, was like, yeah, you have guys that you know are playoff players. Maybe they don't get the points in the regular season. You're like,
yeah.
Like you brought up Claude Lemieux, you know? Yeah, whatever.
yeah.
Playoffs, you got him then. Okay, those guys have like built up a body of work that you can rely upon when you look back.
But when it's your goalie.
When it's your goalie, it's a whole different feeling. And the thing is, too, right now, you can look at different teams like Boston when they went in with Swayman and Allmark. Okay, you can balance it out, and one can go to the next.
Yeah.
Do you feel that comfortable if you've got to move off of Stuart Skinner? I don't. I don't think they should. Do you want me to do like a producing job here as well? Because we're about to wrap up on time.
Yeah, I know we're going to get to showtime. I just want to make one more point. Detroit is playing tonight. I'm going to get there in a second here. Chicago and Utah. Just one question that I want to sort of raise at this point here. And Greg kind of winked at this a second ago, talking about the Chicago Blackhawks and Seth Jones and keeping Connor Bedard happy, and how everything, hasn't gone according to plan, and things, have kind of fallen off the wagon, and it's going to be a lottery pick, etc. That at what point do we start wondering about Kyle Davidson in Chicago?
Yeah.
Right? Like we've wondered about Kevin Adams in Buffalo, right? The idea that if there's no playoffs in Buffalo, that there's going to be a lot of pink paper in the fax machines. That's a very dated reference by me, by the way. What's a fax machine, old man? If they don't make,
I at least know what it is.
If they don't make the playoffs, Elon's going to ask all employees to cite 5 things that they did. How about that? But I wonder at which point, you start to wonder about Kyle Davidson shepherding this rebuild, and not someone who's more veteran, because it has not worked. And now you have like Seth Jones talking openly about like, oh, I loved it in Columbus. Oh yeah, I'd love to go back to. Yeah. All I'm saying is, I wonder if that's going to be part of the conversation here shortly, if it isn't already, around Chicago. Joel Eriksson injured at practice. Mike Russo with the bad news today on IR, and it looks like it's going to be a long time. For one of the best two-way centers in the NHL, it is Minnesota Detroit, the XL Energy Center. Andrew Kopp with the torn pec muscle, 4 to 6 months. Anytime I hear torn pec, all I can think of is pain. Like I think of like torn quad. Like torn pec's got to be like so painful, Zach.
Have you ever seen the videos of guys tearing them?
I've seen quads. When the muscle curls, it freaks me out, man. I just like, oh.
Those make me cringe. I've seen the pec videos. You've seen like a
I haven't seen pec
where
videos.
Guys doing something, the pec goes, and then it's like,
I just can't do those.
You just see it like go, and it's like Kevin Durant when in Toronto with the Raptors on his Achilles.
Bad. And speaking of Detroit, because Zach Phillips is such a great producer,
doing my job,
kept me in bounds. He dragged us skate, and he's kept us on side. So here we go. So this is the only point, and I don't know if I've mentioned this one. So a couple of years ago, in a conversation with Jake Allen, we were talking about 5-hole goals. And he said, a lot of people confuse 5-hole goals for what's actually going on when a puck goes in and it looks like it's a 5-hole goal. And we just saw this with Patrick Kane. And ever since Allen pointed this out to me, I can't stop seeing it everywhere, to the point where I'm actively like on the drive to a game with my kids. I'm like, if that triangle's open, like you hit it. You see that, like you hit that, because kids always want to go bar down. So this is Patrick Kane on Sunday. So he's tucks it in, and it looks like he goes 5-hole would be the common refrain for this one. But what Pat Kane actually does, so if you pause it there a second ago, so when, like, look at the goaltender there. Okay, so that's Lucas Dostal. So there is a triangle, Jake Allen has pointed out to me, and now I see it everywhere. There is a triangle between the stick and the right skate. Okay, and where people will look at it and say he's shooting 5-hole, he's not. What shooters are shooting at now, and you see a lot of this with right-hand shots more so than left in some cases, although it's wide open for a left-hand shot. What guys will do is they'll train themselves now to shoot for the right skate, because with a left catch goaltender, that paddle, when it's down, forms a triangle between the heel of the stick, the blocker, and the right skate. And if you can fire it and hit the right skate, the puck is going in. And that's where guys are at now. So when you say, he's shooting 5-hole, he's not technically shooting 5-hole. He's shooting at the right skate. Now that I've told you this, watch, he's shooting at the right skate. There's so many examples of this, and you'll probably see a bunch of them tonight, because we got a ton of games on the board this year. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. We got 12 games tonight. You're going to see someone shoot for the right skate. And just remember, it was your good buddies Jeff and Zach here on the sheet that said, watch for the triangle. Watch players shoot in triangle. Watch guys shoot for the right skate. And Zach, I know you don't have beer league tonight because you're going to be doing the pre and the post for the Toronto Maple Leafs and the Boston Bruins. But the next time you're at beer league, where are you shooting?
Thursday,
where are you shooting?
For the triangle.
You're such a freaking liar, because you're a beer league loser, so you're going bar down like everybody else in beer league. With the big swoop Sally too. Try shooting triangle.
I'm shooting Shane Wright stuff, like under the gloves, under the blockers.
Look when he's 13 years old. Playing Dom Mills. Everyone else is going bar down. Nah, he's going like under the blocker. Okay.
Can we do something quickly here before we go? Remind people to send us an email. Send us an email if you got questions.
And you know what? We had one. We had one.
thenationnetwork.com.
Yes, and we had one queued up for today. Why don't we lead with that tomorrow? It's a really, I'll tell you what, it's a really good question, because like you, I'm sure that you like the sort of off the wall, less obvious questions. So got one from a gentleman with the name of Dean Coleman about white jerseys and stains. I'm going to answer that tomorrow. So the first question is going to be about a stain, because I actually talked to an equipment manager from an NHL team today about it. And it's a pretty good answer to a really, really good question. We'll get that on the show for you tomorrow. Also on the show tomorrow, I should have mentioned this when Greg was on. Damn it. Bad host. Producers got to remind me. When in doubt, blame producer Vic. When in doubt, blame producer Zach. Anthony Cirelli.
Well, usually you were blaming Vic because he's not here. But
I like that too. I like sniping at people that aren't around to defend themselves. That's a real mark of a pro and a good human being too. Just sniping at people that aren't around to defend themselves. Anthony Cirelli, the Tampa Bay Lightning, and your gold medal, Team Canada at the Four Nations. Anthony Cirelli will be aboard. You like that one? That one found a home with you. Huh? I'll tickle you under the chin a little bit. You like that one? Okay, all right, that's good. All right, we'll move along then, Zach, and we'll remind everybody the morning cup of hockey tomorrow, 9 a.m. Eastern. Daily Faceoff live at noon, and then our Little Monkey Act at 3 o'clock Eastern. Thanks to Greg Wyshynski from ESPN for stopping by. And again, Anthony Cirelli from the Tampa Bay Lightning and Team Canada. Did you know they won the gold at that little tournament where you had to play 4 games? Yeah, they won gold there. So Anthony Cirelli on the program tomorrow. Have a great day. Enjoy the games tonight. We're back on the sheet tomorrow, 3 Eastern. Have a great day. If you enjoyed that video, and we certainly hope that you do, please hit the subscribe button right there here at Daily Faceoff. I will put this lineup up against any hockey lineup anywhere. It all gets underway at 9 o'clock Eastern with Morning Cup of Hockey. That is Johnny Lazarus. That is Colby Cohen. Then at noon, it's DFO Live. And then 3 o'clock Eastern, The Sheet. Get caught up on everything in hockey.